Hi, this is Tony Kent, and this is another episode of Tony Kent Writes and Cross-Examines. Today, in our metaphorical witness box, giving evidence about her career is the author OLIVIA KIERNAN. OLIVIA is the author of the Frankie Sheerhan, DCS, I'm going to get onto what DCS means in a moment, DCS Frankie Sheerhan series, which began in 2018 with Too Close to Breathe, which continued last year with The Killer in Me, and which is continuing, I think it's July, isn't it, Olivia? July 23rd, with If Looks Could Kill. Now, I believe that should have come out in April, but because we're all stuck in our kitchens and our bedrooms and our houses, I think they had the very sensible notion of putting it back until people can actually find a book in a shop. Yeah. So, Olivia, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks very much, as good as it can be.
How are you enjoying, you're not very far from me, so I imagine you're experiencing the same weather. How are you enjoying this lovely day while still locked up indoors?
It's really beautiful, but I get hay fever, so I tend to kind of look out at all the little seeds floating in the air and admire it from afar.
My wife's suffering the same thing today, and she's really hoping that she has hay fever and not the coronavirus. So.
They're saying, oh, if you have any symptoms of ear, nose and throat symptoms, stay indoors. I'm just going, that's just me for 6 weeks now. So I'm just sneezing all the time. But
well, this will happen when you move to a sort of country area. But you come from County Meath, don't you, which is in Ireland, as we can tell from your voice. And that's proper country, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. I didn't get allergies until I was about 15. So we spent, cliche Irish childhood in the country. In farms and haystacks and bringing in the hay and helping with the cattle and all that kind of stuff, and never suffered from it. As I got older, I suffered from it. But I have to say, normally it doesn't start until mid-June-ish. But I think probably because, I don't know whether it's to do with the less pollution in the air, whatever, the pollen, I think just seems to be magnified sooner this year, anyway, for me.
I've noticed the same thing. I didn't get... I moved to Chelsea, I think, when I was about 30, so how old was I? About 35. And I'd never, ever had a blocked up nose, apart from when people used to break it. But I'd never had a blocked up nose from hay fever until I moved to Chelsea. And there must have been some flower around there that just disagreed with me. Yeah. And I now get hay fever, and moved away from there 2.5 years ago, and I still get it. It's very weird how it can just come up.
Yeah, I know, exactly. It's annoying. And the antihistamines just knocked me out, so I'm not... Try not to take them.
Anyway, I know you were a chiropractor, and you're qualified in things like anatomy, aren't you, and physiology. Yeah. So I'm talking to you like you're a doctor, but really we should be talking to you like you're an author. So let's talk about what you are now. You write the DCS Frankie Sheerhan. What is DCS? Because obviously she's an Irish cop. She said she's in Dublin, isn't she? And as a criminal barrister, I'm just wondering. For me, that's a defence case statement, but obviously in Ireland it's something else.
Detective Chief Superintendent. So
right. Okay.
Yeah. So
that's a fairly major rank.
Yes. So I purposely wanted her. I mean, I wanted her slightly active on cases to believable. I know it's probably not totally reality that she would be
Ireland. We don't know.
Well, that's it. You create the world that you want with regards to, and there are some detective chiefs who will get involved depending on where they are. And I know the commissioner in Ireland, anyway, pre-pandemic, was hoping to kind of distribute the power within the rank of the Gardaí, rather than having so much authority in the Phoenix Park and the Gardaí headquarters. He wanted to kind of distribute that power throughout Ireland. So as you know yourself, with these protocols and throughout the legal system, or particularly on the ground with the Gardaí or the police, they change depending on the commissioner. They will come in and they'll kind of shift things around, and people get different labels. But I deliberately wanted Frankie to have a high rank, partially because she's a woman, and I thought, okay, I really wanted this female Gardaí to be quite high up in the Gardaí, but not so high that she wouldn't be getting involved in some of the cases. So I didn't kind of make her commissioner or that. So she still has bosses over her. So that's why I chose that, really. It's just she was a woman. I wanted her high ranking. I wanted her really confident in her role. I wanted her to have some kind of longevity, even though she is quite young for her rank. I wanted her to have some kind of longevity so she could get as much experience. I wanted her to have some behavioral science experience, which again I know is kind of controversial in some in reality, but in the world I've created, she has kind of profiling skills, and that she could kind of have a good broad base of touching over quite a few areas of the Gardaí. So because obviously that's more fun when you're plotting, isn't it? If you're a detective, more experience,
No, I mean it's a balancing act, isn't it? I invented for one of my books a character, DCI Joe O'Leary, who's in the murder squad. And I was able to base her very much on murder squads that I've dealt with in my sort of day-to-day job. And again, it's a balancing act because you're thinking, well, I know who does most of the investigating. I know who's and how much admin gets added to each rank that you go to. And so you do have to at some point just say, do you know what, this is fiction. And I'm creating this world, and it's pretty much the way the world works, but in some ways it's not. Because ultimately, you don't want to read this if this is about how the world really works.
No, and you probably know yourself, like with the work you do, with the majority illegal stuff, it's just so dull. You wouldn't be putting it into, the amount of paperwork that Frankie would have to fill, or that her detectives under her would have to fill out just for just the smallest thing, would be just so boring to read. And that's the same in whatever genre you're writing. When I was studying writing, our tutor used to, he talked about something called focalization, which is, you have the camera angle and you have your beginning of your story, the end of your story. There is a world and numerous paths to get from A to B. Your job is to choose the most interesting path. And that's the same in crime fiction. So if that means cutting out some of the more boring aspects of police work, which many police officers say there are many, we can't have Frankie heading off on a training day for 2 days in the middle of a serial killer hunt that you're writing about. Which is
I've got to take a week off to go and give evidence in a different case.
But that's probably the case with some police officers. They will have an ongoing case that might be really interesting and gripping to the outside world, but in the reality, they might have a training day in the middle of that to learn about how to follow procedure, or TED interviews or interrogation techniques and things like that.
That's absolutely right. We whenever we're setting a trial date, we get given a dates to avoid sheet, and all of those things are on there, and there are so many of them. So it's when I'm writing a court scene, and I think I've got one book that's a court, it's a legal thriller. And I had to get it accurate because I'm a barrister, and every other barrister is a bastard, and every other one apart from me, they would have read it, and if I'd got anything wrong, I'd have been crucified. And so it's probably as accurate as you'll ever read in terms of cross-examinations, not least because I actually did them all. I made sure that the way I made it accurate was just stole a load of cross-examinations from my own career and built a case around them. But again, what I had to do was completely shorten them and just take out huge swathes of information and technical terms, because ultimately you're writing entertainment. It's not a textbook.
It must be. I never thought of it that way, because I've always thought when I'm writing this, like, you kindly gave me some advice for if looks could kill and some of the legal scenes in it, the court scenes. And I've always thought like writers like me who've no legal experience were under a little bit more pressure that we'd be criticized more. For you, it's worse, because as you say, you have to take out that stuff. You have to lighten it. You have to focus on the high points. Otherwise, it's so boring. But your colleagues will immediately be going, well, that's totally unrealistic. That wouldn't happen within 2 days, or that wouldn't happen within a day. Or what happens if you're writing in this time of pandemic a legal thriller, and you've got your case suspended for an entire 12 months.
It becomes a really long book with a very, very boring middle. So tell us, where does Frankie Sheerhan herself come from, the character?
Well, partly when I started writing Too Close to Breathe, I really wanted to explore our perceptions of men and women in the roles of victim and predator. And so I needed a perspective that would come from that, with the most judgment and most kind of, I guess, not prejudice in that way, but like she makes assumptions on the first victim that she finds in the book, which is a woman. And the reader will go along with that because she's a female detective. But Also, as well, I wanted to write a female detective because I think, well, there's a lot more of them in crime fiction now. I wanted one that was high ranking, and I wanted to
write. So many of those. There are, I mean, there's not a huge amount of. Yeah.
I just wanted to, because in the job that I did, I was a chiropractor. It's a very physical job, and a lot of people might be quite surprised at how he could bend you into a pretzel, if you with the right techniques and the right training. Yeah. And I think I just wanted to, haven't met that in my own career, perhaps, of people being surprised at what women are capable of, and just thinking, well, Frankie doesn't approach her job as a woman. She approaches it as a detective. She's trained. I'm sure you're the same with your female colleagues. Like your female colleagues aren't going to come into court approaching it as a female colleague.
Yeah, absolutely.
Come into it as a lawyer or as a barrister. That's how they're trained. So that was important. I know that's not hugely original, but I think you just can't have enough of that in today's day and age. So definitely wanted that. But more so, it was just her voice. I really just heard this woman's voice come through really strongly. I could visualize her walking down this kind of damp street in Dublin. She'd come out of an autopsy, and something had kind of wrong-footed her. She was used to being a survivor. She's seen herself as very, as I said, didn't think of herself as female or weak or in any way susceptible to perhaps some of the crimes that other people are susceptible to. She was the hero in her head, and something had happened to her very recently that had kind of scratched that a little bit, and now she was having to make room for the term victim in her mind. So when she sees this autopsy, which is relatively run-of-the-mill for her, she's compassionate towards the victim, but nothing complex or nothing too gory, she sees herself in that victim's place, probably for one of the first times that she's done that. So it's unnerved her. So I could really feel that when I started writing. And that's where she came from, really. And the name I chose deliberately, again, because it wasn't necessarily firmly in the female box or male box. But, so I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It's very interesting. And of course, you're now 3 books in. July 23rd, which everyone needs to buy. Well, you can pre-order now. You've got If Looks Could Kill. What's that about? What's Frankie up to in Looks Could Kill?
So in her latest case, we take her out of Dublin City. The last 2 have been mostly around Dublin, maybe a little heading out into the suburbs a little bit. So she heads to the rural Wicklow Mountains this time. So a complete change of pace, even though it's only 2 hours outside Dublin City. It's very
different.
It's very remote.
Half my family are from Wicklow.
I got to visit it last summer again for the first time in ages. And it's just spectacular out there. So when the lockdown is lifted and we're able to travel, I'd highly recommend people go pay a visit if you're in Ireland. So it's in rural Wicklow. She heads out. Debbie Nugent is missing, and a bloody scene in her house suggests murder. And all eyes turn to Debbie's daughter Margot when it's discovered she's lived with that scene for 3 days. So there's kind of a I won't say anything else. It's really hard with
no, it's really hard, but you've just got to give enough that people are going to be interested in reading it. And I have to say, as a people should be interested in reading it anyway, based on the 2 before. But anyone who's not read them, no, that's really that would get me. That's enough to get me, I have to say. The idea of somebody living in a bloody murder scene is it's kind of hard to explain, isn't it?
I know, and I'd researched quite a few of those cases. It was surprising how many of them there are. I don't know as a barrister whether you've come up against some of them, but people who have lived with loved ones either in denial or because there has been benefits that have been coming to the house, and
I've seen a lot of that. I've not represented anyone for that. I've seen a lot of that.
Yeah. So there was a few interesting cases that I came across because it seemed so unbelievable when I was writing it. I was going, how can I make this believable? Which is obviously our job. That this would happen. And obviously with all my books, they all start at a small little point, and then they
expand. As all good books.
There is more to it,
as all good books should. Olivia, we've got 20 seconds left. So 15 minutes really fly. So we've now got 14 seconds left. So I'm going to say thank you very, very much. Good luck with the new book. Good luck with the continued sales of the other books. But thanks very much for joining us on a lovely sunny Saturday. And
thanks so much.
hopefully see you soon. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.